Good evening. Welcome, everyone. I'm Lisette Mendez, Director of Programs for the Miami Book Fair. On behalf of all of us at Miami Book Fair and at Books and Books, we welcome you here tonight. We are honored to host a music legend, Mr. Richard Thompson, who, in his memoir, Beeswing, Losing My Way and Finding My Voice, gives us an intimate look at the early years of his career from 1967 to 1975. Richard Thompson is considered one of the top 20 guitarists of all time. And up to the start of the pandemic, he performed up to 150 shows a year. We're in for a real treat, as Mr. Thompson will share with us today not only his story, but also music. And he will be interviewed on our virtual stage by Michael Stock, host of Miami's own folk and acoustic music radio program on WLRN. Mr. Stock has been playing Mr. Thompson's music for more than 35 years. To purchase the book, please click on the link and support Books and Books, our community's independent bookseller. To ask questions, please drop them in the Ask a Question box at the bottom of your screen. I will also drop some links to reviews and news articles about the book on the chat. And for more information on upcoming virtual events, visit booksandbooks.com and miamibookfair.com. And without too much more delay, I bring to the stage our guests for tonight, Mr. Michael Stock.
Hi, everybody.
And Mr. Richard Thompson is right here.
Well, good evening, Richard.
Good evening, Michael.
I didn't know you were one of the top guitarists, 2020 top guitarists in the world. That's incredible.
It amazes me too. I think this is a Rolling Stone thing. You know, Rolling Stone have these really strange guitar polls from time to time, where you know Keith Richards is number 2 and Andre Segovia is number 97. You know, it's a strange thing, but on one of those, I crept into the top 20. You know, it only happened once, but my publicists love to bring that one out. It's a good one.
Well, I just finished reading Beeswing. I hope it's is it backwards there? I don't know. But,
no, what a delightful looking book. I must read it sometime.
Well, it was great reading. It was such an insight into that world that just 5 or 6 years that you spent with Fairport and your beginnings. Speaking about the beginnings, one of the things that surprised me is that you would I guess you would call yourself stubborn because you never really wanted to go the popular route.
Idealist, I think, is probably the best description. Well, we were a band of idealists. You know, our bass player Ashley was very idealistically driven. I was as well. You know, I didn't want to be part of the herd. I wanted to do something different, at least. Successful or not, success is nice. You know, but buys you a house occasionally. That's always handy. But you know, failing that, then I was quite happy to be the ignored, tortured poet. You know, there's a lot of mileage in that. You know,
I was surprised. Well, there's a few things in the book that surprised me. One is that the immediate success of Fairport. You were booked at the UFO Club, which was playing more psychedelic, LSD-laced music, more or less, and you kind of fit in.
Yeah. I think everybody fit in. It was a weird time, you know. I think because of psychedelia, this kind of explosion of you know, Pink Floyd, the Soft Machine, you know, these very psychedelic bands, and you know, light shows and you know, films running at the same time. You know, the whole thing, pretty much as you had it in America, as you had in San Francisco. And it was a very accepting world. I don't know if that's because of the drug intake of the audience, or if they were just broad-minded. But you'd have incredibly different, diverse people on the same bill, and no one thought twice about Fairport, who were really a sort of folk rock band, you know, being on a bill with you know, the Nice or you know, or Pink Floyd, indeed. So it was an accepting time, and it was also a time when immediately for Fairport there was lots of work. That they were always looking for bands. You know, we played in clubs. We played a lot in colleges. Colleges seemed to have a budget, that seemed to have some entertainment budget to for some reason. It only happened for a while at that level, but sometimes we'd be on a bill like an all-night thing with like 20 other bands, and some of them would be like big chart bands like the Hollies, Small Faces, American acts would be on these bills as well, and we just go all night, and that's not cheap. So I think there was some kind of serious government subsidy of the universities at that point. But it meant that Fairport just worked a lot of the time, and we slowly rose up through the ranks. Our fees slowly, doubled and trebled and quadrupled and halved and doubled, and Anyway,
it seems you were pretty lucky that on that first gig at the UFO, Joe Boyd was there, and he took a liking to you, and it's like you immediately had a record contract.
Just the first couple of months that we were, a proper band, Joe spotted us, and we were very lucky it was Joe. For people who don't know, Joe Boyd, was a producer who also produced the Incredible String Band, early Pink Floyd records, Nick Drake, some of Sandy Denny's records, John Martin. So to fall into that company, we were very lucky, and Joe was really like-minded, and I think he saw in Fairport something that had potential. Anyway,
Joe Boyd was an American. Was that unusual?
Not particularly. Well, Joe at the time had come over to the UK as the head of Elektra Records in London, and Joe said to Jack Holtzman, the head of Elektra, "There's this great band called Pink Floyd. You should sign them." And Jack Holtzman said, "No, I don't think so." So there's this great band called The Move. You should sign them. "No, I don't think so. I don't think we want them." So Joe got frustrated and kind of quit his job, and then became an independent record producer, and started producing all this wonderful music, and maybe a good job he quit Elektra.
I was also surprised in the book how dedicated you were to folk music, and being independent and going your own path. You kind of rejected going the blues way and kind of poo-pooed people who copied the American music.
Well, I can't tell you how many blues guitar players there were in London in 1967 or 66, 67. I mean, the streets were thick with them, really. Everybody was playing the blues. Everybody wanted to follow, Eric Clapton, that kind of model of blues. A lot of R&B as well, a bit of soul music. We were always kind of connected to a lot of folk roots, really. And I think maybe we also just listened to a wider range of music, but we would listen to jazz, classical music. Our formative years were spent in folk clubs, listening to that whole array of traditional music and anything bluegrass. I mean, right across the spectrum. So in the early years of Fairport, we were really reflecting that diversity. And our first album is just all over the place. I mean, it really it's bringing in so many influences that it sounds almost chaotic. It's like what is the style? And there wasn't really a style. It wasn't until the second album that we really seemed to sound more cohesive and seemed to have more of a direction.
You were one of the few bands with a female lead, even before Sandy joined the band.
That was unusual at the time. Merely because we had a girl in the band, we got compared to Jefferson Airplane. That was the whole basis of the comparison, basically. So it was unusual to have women in the band. There weren't too many at that time, and I think when Sandy joined the band, she was something of a pioneer, and really had to fight quite hard to be accepted as an equal in the music business, to not be patronized in the music business. So she was one of the first, and at a time when there weren't too many female singer-songwriters either. So she really had to plow quite a difficult furrow.
You go into detail of about life with Sandy Denny, and I didn't realize you fired her from the band. Not you personally, but the band fired her. I didn't know that was the way it went down.
Well, it was. I think we figured that she was already pretty much out the band. She'd already.
You say in the book she didn't show up for at the airport.
Yeah. I mean, she kind of hinted before that maybe her priorities lay elsewhere, and there was the big falling out where she didn't turn up for the Copenhagen flight for a 10-day tour in Scandinavia. And we just thought, well, she's kind of already gone. This is the last straw. It's been a steady trickle of late appearances or non-appearances. I don't know. So yes, we fired her. I mean,
she seemed quite independent because she was also working, I guess, secretly as for commercial TV that you didn't know about.
I think that was a survival thing. I think for Sandy, well, when she joined Fairport, we weren't on, rock star wages exactly. And she'd been working as a solo singer around the folk clubs, which actually isn't a bad standard of living. You can do quite well. Reflected in the fact that Sandy took cabs all over London, which the rest of us couldn't afford, and she drank champagne, which is like way beyond our budget. So. I think, Sandy, we're very sneakily, nip off and do these commercials without telling us, because she feared, probably correctly, that we would condemn her as being mercenary, and so when we saw her ads on TV, this ethereal voice singing about we're all much better for butter or something, then she said, well, that's not me. That's somebody trying to sound like me, and we thought, oh, okay, fair enough.
Well, you mentioned how also Sandy, she left. She went on to make other bands, but you kept on recording with her. You remained friends with her for many years.
Yeah, well, that's a funny thing about Fairport. We started out as friends, unlike some bands that don't start out as friends. We started out as friends, and we stayed friends in spite of firings, fallings out, whatever. As various people left the band, it was uncomfortable for a while, maybe a week or two, but then, it kind of went back to being friendly again. Happened with Sandy, happened with Ian Matthews, both of whom I worked with after I left Fairport. So whatever that family thing was, it was very strong. And I think also because the British folk rock scene was so small, that inevitably you kind of ended up working with the same people. There are only so many drummers and so many bass players that could play that style of music, really and truly. So things tended to go round, and you might be in this band, and then you're in that band, and then it's you meet up with some other colleagues you knew from somewhere else, and everybody knew everybody else, and it was friendly. It's still friendly. I mean, I still go to the Fairport Reunion Festival in Cropredy. I hopefully, that fingers crossed, that's going to happen this August. And I'll see my old Fairport colleagues, and we'll have a great time, and we'll play some of the old stuff. I think we're going to play the Full House album from 1970, which was supposed to have been played in 2020 as the 50th anniversary. But it'll be the slightly less resonant 51st anniversary.
Well, you were only a teenager, 18, 19 years old when Fairport, and when you only spent a few years, 4 years with the band. But the band was 5 years with the band. But there was a major turning point when the accident happened, and the band was in serious trouble, and you were seriously considering stopping playing with Fairport.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it was very traumatic, and we thought, well, maybe the price is too high. This has been fun. It's been a great ride, but if this is the price you have to pay for a life of music, then maybe it's not for us. Maybe we'll do other jobs. But then we figured we weren't any good at any other jobs, really. So perhaps we had to be musicians. And our approach was really to say, well, we're going to draw a line, and we're not going to do any of the old repertoire that we did with Martin Lamble. We're going to have a fresh start, and we're going to work on this new project, this project of British traditional songs played in the style of a rock band, with amplified instruments and drums, which no one had really done before, not in the British sense of the word. So this was the beginning of a new genre.
When did you get exposed to the band? Because they were a positive influence to Fairport.
I think they were. I think the band showed us who we could be. Well, when the Big Pink album came out, we thought, well, these guys are so good at what they do. It's almost what Fairport would aspire to be. But then, we come from the wrong side of the Atlantic. It would be dishonest of us to be playing music of this quality based on all these wonderful American roots. There's gospel in there, blues, a bit of jazz, rock and roll, country. All these things are seamlessly blended in the style in the style that the band has. So for us, it was like, well, we can't do this. So what are we doing exactly? So maybe what we should excel at, what we could excel at, is playing our own culture, but playing music that comes more from our own roots, where we come from, and we can blend that with the amplified instruments and the drums. So the band was really an inspiration and a kind of a warning that we shouldn't go any further down that road, because that had been covered. That we should really retreat and see if we can be as good as the band were in America, and see if we could do the same thing in the UK.
One of the another interesting thing I really liked about Beeswing is that you go into the history of British folk music, and guitarists like Davy Graham and Martin Carthy. Another great thing about reading the book is YouTube is right there. If you mention a song or a name, I just go right there and I could hear what you're talking about.
Aha! Yeah. It's a great thing. Yeah.
Well, is that frustrating for you? Because I mean, I look at a YouTube video with millions of views, and you're not getting any revenue from that.
Oh, I don't care about that. No, my job really in the book is to say, apart from telling my own story, is to say, here's this great New Orleans artist, Snooks Eaglin. It's to say, here's Davy Graham. Isn't he fantastic? Listen to this record. I'm glad when people cross-refer and people go off and check stuff on YouTube. That's the greatest thing. And maybe they'll buy a Davy Graham record. There's a great one with Shirley Collins, a fantastic record.
I wasn't familiar with Angie, and to me, I mean, I listened to that song. I said, "Well, that's fantastic." You said it was a rite of passage for any guitar player to learn Angie.
Well, absolutely, yeah. In about 1965 or something, no, a bit earlier probably, where you had, there was Davy Graham was kind of the pioneer, but then Bert Jansch would play Angie, and Paul Simon was over in playing the folk clubs of the UK at that time. And he'd learn Angie, and I think he recorded it a bit later on. So everybody kind of had to learn to play that. That was just a kind of a thing, and it's a little bit tricky, but it's not too hard. So you can learn it and feel proud that you can get through it. But you definitely had to have a go, at a song like that.
There was a real commitment to the band. I'm not a musician and I'm not a band member, but there was such a commitment that you all moved into what was the name of the house that you all bought, and the old bar that was converted? That was from the house?
It was called the Angel, which is a bit of a deceptive name, I suppose, in many ways. It wasn't much angelic about it, but it was an old pub. It had been a pub. It's an old building. It's like 18th century building. But it was really inhospitable, and we'd actually rejected it. We said, well, this is too barbaric, to live in this place. That there's no heating, it's kind of broken down. It smells of damp. We can't possibly live here. We'll keep looking for something. And then Swarb already had all his stuff in the removal truck. His wife and his kid and all his stuff. And he was on his way from Wales, and he said, "What's the address?" And we said, "Oh shit. Well, we'll have to send him there, and I guess that will have to be the place where we're going to live." And it was really Spartan, we tried to put heating in, but it didn't work very well. There was one bathroom between 14 people, and a dribble of hot water. There's this pathetic little water heater on the wall, and maybe you could get 2 inches of bath water if you were lucky. And there's a queue of people outside the door, all waiting to use the bathrooms. So it was, not the greatest place. But having said that, it had a big sort of entertainment space, which we used for rehearsal. So that was great. There was an open fire in that room where you could stoke up the fire and sit around, late night. And that was where Swarb and I used to write, and we wrote some good songs there.
You also mentioned that the town folk weren't that keen to this band moving in until you did what was it, the orphan and the organ benefits, and
yeah that's interesting. The local vicar, the vicar priest, whatever you call him in America, the local vicar asked us if we could do something like a little concert out in the field for the organ fund, which we did, and we raised some money for basically a new organ for the church, which was great. And then the police came around, which is always a little scary, when there's drugs, literally lying on the table as the police walk in. But they said, "Oh, don't worry, lads. Would you like to do something for the orphan fund, the police orphan fund?" So these are people you don't say no to, of course. And we put on a concert. It got announced on the radio. Thousands of people came. It was a huge success. And after that, the police were our friends. We had no trouble with the police at all.
Did that plant a germ for you doing your festivals yourself, your yearly festival? Was that how this thing started?
Probably not, actually, but there was a long gap between that happening and the first Fairport kind of reunion festival, which I think was late 70s. So there, at least a 10-year gap, and I think a lot of festivals had really appeared in those years. Folk festivals, rock festivals, it became a big thing. It's never stopped growing in the UK. I mean, there's festivals and festivals and festivals. Family festivals, metal festivals, folk festivals. COVID has put a serious dent in all of that, of course. Everything's on hold. But I wouldn't be surprised to see next year everything up and running and, the usual huge summer festival scene reappearing in the UK.
You mentioned in the book how you snuck a peek into Joni Mitchell's personal notebook or songwriting notebook. And you also mentioned you did that to Sandy too. Did you glean any songwriting hints when you did that?
Well, I'm always interested in the process, and sometimes you can learn from looking at other people's songbooks, but it's immoral. I should not have done it, and I never admitted it to Joni herself. But one should not do that sort of thing. But it was interesting how creative she was on the page. Almost, you could see her creativity spilling off the page. And the same with Sandy. Sandy's notebooks were just delightful because they'd be illustrated. There'd be all these great kind of pictures of fairies and women and all kinds of stuff. In Sandy's fertile brain. So there was a great thing. There's a thing called the Paris Review, which publishes interviews with writers. and you can get them going right back to sort of Hemingway and stuff. And I'm always interested in there that they always ask the writers about their method, and that's always fascinating to me. You know, like Hemingway used to like to type standing up, you know, that sort of thing. And what was the great one? I can't remember who it was. Was it like Iris Murdoch or someone, or Margaret Drabble, one of those English novelists of the 50s, 60s. And she went to great pains to build a writing room under the stairs in her house. And she got it perfect. She got the little table there. She got the light just right. She got all her pencils all lined up properly. You know, got the right paper. Everything was absolutely perfect. And she could never bring herself to actually set foot in that room. It was too intimidating. And she ended up just writing at the kitchen table, as she had always written at the kitchen table. So I'm always interested in people's methods. I have my own eccentricities, which I don't have to go into right now, unless you ask me.
Well, one of them, I suppose, is that you write the title of the song first, and then everything comes after that.
That was only one time that I did that. I don't do that as a rule, but it's just one of those stream of consciousness things where I'm sitting mixing Henry the Human Fly, and John Wood is doing all the work over there now, and I'm just sitting with my notebook, and I just start writing down song titles. You know, I think I was inspired by Woody Guthrie, because in Woody Guthrie's the Bound for Glory book, he takes a whole page and he says, basically, he says, songwriting's easy. It's a piece of cake, you know. All we need is a good title. And he says, you're struggling for a tune? Take another tune and just change a couple of notes. It's easy, you know. It's easy. And he writes a whole page of song titles, just like off the cuff. You know, the something blues. You know, the freight train blues, blah blah blues. You know, this and that and the other. You know. He writes these great song titles down, and I think I was inspired by that, and so I'm sitting there, you know, at the mixing desk, and I'm just start writing down titles, and every song on the next album, I Want to See the Bright Lights Tonight, came from that list. It's a strange thing, but I wouldn't do that all the time. That was just a kind of a one-off. I don't necessarily work that way. I work, you know, words first or music first.
Was it you came to America, I guess, the first time as a tourist? You didn't play. Did you play that first time you came to America?
Not really. We were recovering. We had a very bad road accident in the band. It killed our drummer and my girlfriend at the time. And as a kind of a distraction almost, Joe Boyd sent some of the band, not all of the band, to America for the first time. You know, maybe to kind of heal us a bit from the trauma, but also I think so we could check it out and see, you know, to somewhere where we were probably going to play that year or the next year. Just get used to the idea that this was a different market and a different country. So you know, we went over. We met a whole bunch of interesting people, lots of wonderful folk musicians.
Did they know who you were? Did they know who you were?
Generally, no. Generally, no. You know, but we had some of these people on record. You know, so someone like Richard Farina, who had died maybe a year or two previously. We went to visit Richard's widow, Mimi Farina, the sister of Joan Baez, up in San Francisco. And you know, for us it was extraordinary to meet these people that we loved, you know, from the records. And this happened all across America. Everywhere that we went, we ran into these really interesting people. So it was an extraordinary time. And then when we went back as a band, touring later on, we could renew those friendships and dig a little deeper into the whole culture.
I love the story you tell in your book, Beeswing, of coming across Buck Owens. Would you mind telling that story? That was great.
Yeah, we were in Detroit Airport, waiting for our flight. So we were having breakfast, and we start hearing these insults from the next booth, and you know, just kind of long-haired, long-haired hippies, isn't she a pretty girl? There's all this kind of stuff that as a long-haired hippie you would generally get, but it's a sort of intense and quite nasty. And I sort of leaned around the booth and there's these guys in kind of like cowboy hats, and nice, jackets all matching, and it's and I had their records at home. It's Buck Owens and the Buckaroos, I sit in the next booth, and they're bad mouthing us. I mean, they're trashing us, and this was such a difficult situation to be insulted by people that you really admired. I love the songwriting, I love the musicianship on these records, and you have to read the book to get the punchline. Anyway, I'll leave it there.
Well, it was fascinating. I enjoyed that. But did you consider yourself a hippie?
Kind of outskirts of hippiedom. Well, I sort of had to dress like a hippie. To be in disguise, if you like, to disguise myself as a hippie. But I was always a bit aloof, a bit removed from the movement. I never quite believed in the whole hippie thing, to tell you the truth. I could kind of see the pretentiousness of it in many ways. So I sort of held myself back intellectually.
I don't recall, it's kind of blurring my mind when you played the Philly Folk Festival, but it seems that your music didn't catch on until you played the Philly Folk Festival.
I think it was really a matter of geography, really. I think we were doing very well in the UK. We were going down a storm most places, and our career was on the up. When we came to America, we found the audiences kind of stoned and a bit indifferent. Maybe because we were the opening acts for bands like Traffic and Jethro Tull, who were there to see the main thing. So I think we felt that the audiences didn't quite get it. But then we played a proper folk festival, which was probably much more our target audience, but people who understood traditional music and what we were trying to do to it. And at the Philly Festival in 1970, we absolutely stormed it. It was incredible. Scenes, of gay abandon and just ridiculous. So that was very encouraging for us. And if I stayed in the band longer, I would have enjoyed, coming back and certainly playing more folk festivals and folk clubs.
Did you get any kickback because you did take this traditional music to a new place?
I think people respected the fact that we were not recycling American music. I think people saw that we were really trying to do something different, and I think we were respected for that, for being original at that time.
Well, the folk clubs in London or in England, I guess you and McCall might have been behind the movement of you're only allowed to play songs that is from your heritage, and you can only sing in that accent.
That was definitely something at the beginning. Ewan McCall opened his club, the Blues and Ballads Club in it was like 1953 or 54, and he was horrified, or his wife was anyway, was horrified when Lonnie Donegan, who became a huge star in the UK, started singing Rock Island Line in this kind of phony American accent. And they said, well, we can't have this. This is just not proper, really. So we're going to have a policy where you have to sing songs from your own culture in your own accent, which was actually hypocritical at the time, because Ewan McCall kind of pretended to be Scottish. He was actually, his name was Jimmy Miller, and he was from Manchester in England. But he has Scottish ancestry, but he kind of played up the whole Scottish thing. So it's a very hypocritical thing. And Ewan was a bit of a curmudgeon. But as folk clubs, as the folk movement grew throughout Britain, all kinds of different clubs sprang up. Some were very sort of puritanical, rather along the lines of Ewan McCall's approach. Others, you could sing anything you wanted to. There was a club in Hull, the Singers Club in Hull, where you couldn't bring in a guitar. You couldn't bring in an instrument. You had to sing unaccompanied. So when the Watersons, who are Hull's finest sons and daughters, turned up to promote their album of original songs, which were accompanied by instruments, they couldn't play because it wasn't unaccompanied traditional music. It was you know, I think it's okay to have people who hang on to their version of the tradition in that way, but we were never of that school. We always thought, well, you know, do what you like with the song. At least it gets sung.
Well, you played those songs. Yeah. How do you write music to a song that is sung without music?
Good question. Song without accompaniment, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in some cases, some of the songs that we did, it wasn't clear what the melody was. The words had been written down. A song like Sir Patrick Spencer, like a very, very old song. Versions may go back to like 1200. Yeah, so you know, so you find a tune that works. So we took the tune to another song called Hugh the Graham, and we put that to Sir Patrick Spence. But in some cases, you had to do that. The other thing about bringing a song that you might hear unaccompanied, you might hear someone singing it, just standing up and declaiming a song, and you think, well, if I'm going to accompany it, how am I going to do that? Because it's going to lose all that ambiguity. First of all, are you really sure what key it's in? So a guitar player like Martin Carthy develops this style that keeps the ambiguity in the chord structure. He doesn't go all Victorian and say, okay, this is C, this is F, this is G. You know, you kind of reduce the song to Western musical traditions. So that's always a question you have to ask yourself, and it's a kind of a dilemma for folk revivalists. But in other ways, it's a lot of fun to explore those areas.
You mentioned in the book how I think A.J. Lloyd really loved what you were doing. I imagine Ewan MacColl would have hated it.
Ewan MacColl admitted he had a meeting with Ashley Hutchings, our bass player. That you had Ashley over to tea. This is a couple of years after Legion Leaf came out, and he kind of admitted that he appreciated what we did. He didn't necessarily like it, but he appreciated what we did. Ewan's wife, Peggy Seeger, was very upset with me because she felt I wasn't respectful enough towards Ewan's school of folk music. You know, A.L. Lloyd is a great folklorist, folklorist, song collector, one of the best writers about folk music. Came to our first concert at the Festival Hall and loved it. He said it's the most exciting thing I've seen for a long, long time. You know, keep up the good work. So that was encouraging. But it did tend to divide the folk scene in the UK. But one thing is for sure, it transformed it, and it never went back again.
I went down the rabbit hole of Richard Thompson on YouTube preparing for this, and I had to laugh at one interviewer. I said that you didn't think of you as an entertainer, and I thought that was so absurd. And you just kind of laughed it off. But you eventually quit Fairport because they wanted to be more entertaining. Am I getting that right?
No, I don't think you are. Forgive me. I think I quit because I was just tired of being in bands. I've been in bands since I was like 12 years old, and I just I wanted some time to myself. I wanted to develop as a writer and just try other things. You know.
You said you saw Swab shaking his butt, which wasn't a normal thing, I guess, when you're playing. I
think Swab got very excited about the whole rock thing, about the possibilities of him coming out of the folk scene, which was a lot more restrained, and being up on a stage in front of 1,000 people instead of 100 people, and he did get a bit excited about that, and he did play the entertainer a bit actually, and I wasn't sure about that. I thought that was a bit too much, It was kind of playing to the lowest elements really.
So you went on your own, and I won't say you took a step backwards, but playing in small folk clubs with just a dozen people after you've done giant concerts, how did that feel on your psyche?
You know, it was okay. It was a financial necessity, first of all. You know, Linda and I wanted to work together. We'd been working in separate arenas of music. And the logical place to do it without affecting our careers necessarily was to play the folk club circuit in the UK, which was a wonderful circuit. I mean, there were hundreds of clubs, and you could earn a living, and we did. It didn't feel. I mean, we never played to 12 people. I mean, the places were always full up. You know, we had enough of a reputation. The place would be packed. Didn't necessarily have PA systems. If they did, they didn't work very well. But it was a good time, and for me, it was a time to learn more about traditional music because you'd run into some great singers and great characters on the folk scene. I mean, seriously interesting characters and great drinkers as well. So some of the best drinkers were on the folk scene. They could drink the rock stars under the table, basically.
I want to switch the subject a little bit. I don't want to run out of time because I'm curious. Joe Boyd was also the manager of the Incredible string band, as you mentioned. And I know they became, they joined what was a cult, I guess, and it still is around. Were you familiar what the Incredibles were into? What was that thing called? It was,
Scientology, you mean?
Scientology.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was aware of it. I knew other people who looked at Scientology as well. I mean, people like Leonard Cohen looked at Scientology. Some people stayed in it, some people didn't. I was always very wary of it. I didn't want to get involved, and the Increds would try to persuade me sometimes, but I wasn't really interested. And I think eventually they both got out of it. I love the Incredible String Band, by the way. I thought they were absolutely fantastic. This was world music a long time before the word was invented, really. That they'd be drawing in things from so many different cultures, but it was always them. It was always, you can always tell it was the Incredible String Band, whether they were playing, you know, like Indian instruments or instruments from North Africa, or, you know, playing Celtic stuff. I mean, it was just uniquely them. And it was wonderful, certainly for a while anyway. They're really great musicians.
You yourself became a Sufi, and even went to Mecca, which is a wonderful story in the book. Are you still active in that scene?
Yes, I am. Yeah, I haven't really changed in that way.
Is that what Cat Stevens is too?
Cat Stevens is a Muslim. I mean, I'm a Muslim as well. You know, it's the same thing.
Cat, he took a big hit for it, but you seem to have gone under the radar.
Well, I am under the radar. I've always been under the radar. You know, for Yusuf, I mean, it's a tougher thing because he was always a really public figure. And he had a lot of fans, sold a lot of records, and people felt, you know, he'd lost his marbles. He kind of betrayed everybody. I think in his case, he'd had enough. You know, he'd had enough of being successful. Everything you wanted, or all the drugs you wanted, all the women you wanted. He'd had enough of kind of the world at large, and he just wanted to focus on being a more spiritual human being. And I think for him, it was a good move. I think I'm glad that he finally has come back to being a performer. I really missed him as a performer in that time. And I'm glad he's finally got his head around playing and writing. He's writing some great songs again.
What attracted you to Muslim?
Well, from an early age, from a teenager, I was kind of looking for answers, and I just thought that this philosophy suited me best. And as I'm framing this thought, I start to run into the Sufis, and I feel a similarity with them, but I realize that they know more than I do, and I need to learn from these people. And that's an ongoing process, and I'm still learning.
Beeswing is such a beautiful song. It sounds like an old traditional song, but obviously you wrote it. Why did you name that your book after the song?
Beeswing. There's a chapter in the book that talks about the song and how the song reflects, for me anyway, some of the spirit, if you like, of the 60s. Mostly about people dropping out of society. That's what the song is really about. In the song, it's an involuntary dropping out. It's falling through society's safety net. And I knew many people who did the same thing. People I knew at school, did not take the well-traveled path, to university and then to some great job as a lawyer or a doctor or something. They really just dropped out. That they didn't want to do what their parents did. They felt dissatisfied with society. They became hippies. They became drug dealers or drug addicts in some cases. They lived on communes. They did all those very 60s, 70s things. And in some cases that they kind of eventually wove their way back to society. But at the time, it was extraordinary that the number of people I knew who really could not face a role in traditional society.
Richard Thompson, thank you so much for taking. I don't see any questions in the queue there. We could take questions. But I guess lastly, how are you doing? How are you surviving? What are you still like? You still can't tour now because of COVID, but how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. It's been a tough year of lockdown. It's been good for writing. I've done lots of writing. It's coming to an end, I believe. I have shows coming up in the summer, mostly outdoor things in the summer, and a very full schedule next year because everything from this year is shoved into next year. So I'm non-stop next year. It's going to be absolutely great, and I think the audiences are also itching to get back out there. So that's going to be wonderful. I'm seeing questions here.
Oh, good. I see him too.
Shall we ever get a Miami gig that doesn't involve a cruise ship? Okay, great memories of Stephen Talkhouse. Yes, that's a wonderful place up in Long Island. Miami's a funny market to wear my business hat for a moment. It's a very Latino market. I can do a bit of business there. I probably do better in Tampa, to tell you the truth, if I'm in Florida. I'd love to play there again. I can't remember the last time. It's probably about 5 years ago. But please bug your local promoter. That's how these things happen. It's not a matter of me saying, gosh, I'd love to play in Florida. I want to play in Florida, but someone has to promote me. Someone has to say, we'd love to have you down there. Especially in like sort of just December, January. That's a good time. I appreciate that. What else we got?
Will you, or when will there be releasing an all region DVD on your? How old are you?
I'm about. How old am I?
Well, it says on your 70th birthday.
Jeffrey, how old am I? I just turned 72.
Oh, do you have any plans to play with other still active musicians from the heyday of the British rock and roll movement?
Well, absolutely. Okay. First of all, there will not be a DVD or CD release from the Albert Hall. We did not record it. The Albert Hall wanted like thousands and thousands of pounds to record in their facility, and we said, "Well, screw you." I'll be playing with Fairport at the Cropredy Festival this summer in August, August the whatever it is, 11th or something. I'll be there, and I just recorded a track for my ex Linda. I recorded a track with Teddy and some other people. She's doing an album of other people singing her songs. Her voice is pretty shot these days. So that's what I've been doing. Another question says, will Richard be back on Kiamo in 2022? Yes, I will. They've asked me to go back on the Kiamo cruise, and I will be there in 2022. I'll be in my usual cabin if you're looking for me. And
when you think of perfect acoustics, what is the first club or venue that comes to mind?
Perfect acoustics. Ooh, what's it called? There's a wonderful club in Los Angeles. It's an old club from the 1920s or 30s that's just been renovated. It's called the Terragram, which is Margaret backwards. It sounds Greek or something. I think literally in Greek it's Terragram. We've had a P in front. It would be Interesting bit of Greek. Anyway, and that has fabulous acoustics. Great for a band show. I mean, that's the most ideal venue for a band show currently for me in the US. I'm going to be playing acoustically this summer with Judy Collins. Ha ha ha! Be Still My Heart. At Tanglewood. Tanglewood is a wonderful, mostly classical venue out in Massachusetts somewhere. I'm never sure exactly where it is because I'm not driving.
But speaking of Judy Collins, you don't mention at all Who Knows Where the Time Goes in your book.
I didn't know. There's a lot of stuff I left out, or a lot of stuff that my editors decided to prune, and they were usually right. So the book was a lot longer, and it got chopped down. And I did mention Judy Collins, but it seems superfluous actually to the flow of the book, and I think it was correct to leave it out. But I love Judy Collins. Fairport always looked at Judy Collins as being the best interpreter of other people's songs. She always picked the best songs. The first time you'd hear a Bob Dylan cover would be Judy Collins. The first time you hear a Leonard Cohen cover, it'd be Judy Collins. The first time you hear a Joni Mitchell cover, it'd be Judy Collins. She really had taste coming out of her ears. Wonderful singer, lovely lady. She still looks and sounds fantastic. God bless her.
You mentioned, Fairport did a lot of Bob Dylan songs. I guess that was with the help of Joe Boyd's input, but you never met Bob Dylan.
I never met
Bob Dylan.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did a show with him in Seville, in Spain, at a guitar festival. Probably in the when was that, 90s maybe. And a few years ago, I did this thing called the Americana tour, which had Bob and Wilco and My Morning Jacket and a couple of other people. And I was kind of I was bottom of the bill. I was opening the show at like 5:30 p.m. But what a fantastic bill to be on, and I did lots of jamming with Wilco. That was wonderful, and I had a really nice conversation with Bob. You know, he was just so nice and friendly and charming. One of the most interesting people, the last and this century.
Well, I certainly had a great time reading Beeswing, and I guess that's it. I don't know. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I'd like to say thank you, everyone who's already bought the book. It's doing extraordinarily well. I should be really, really pissed off if I sell more books than I do records. So that would be a really bad indication that I should be switching careers. But I have many more books in me that they're just about other things than me, thank God. So the next book, less about me, more about other people or other things. Perhaps I'll write detective fiction. What do you think?
Well, you can't get books on YouTube or Spotify, so I would imagine that they're more profitable than writing songs.
I suppose so. I've had more interest for this book than I've had for my last sort of 17 albums. And I don't know what this says. So this is a bit, yes.
Well, was there anything that the editor cut out that you thought was fascinating that we should know about?
Well, really, it was just more detail, and it was tangential. It wasn't really in the flow of the book. I mean, nothing drastic. A couple of salacious episodes, perhaps, that I might have got sued for.
There was one funny episode of getting drunk late at night. Now that you're a Muslim, you don't drink. But I imagine there were more episodes of heavy drinking and partying.
There was a lot of drinking went on. But the problem with some of that stuff is I don't necessarily remember the drunken episodes. People tell me, things I did when I was drunk, but I don't really remember. And in comparing notes with my fellow musicians, the stuff they don't remember. Yeah, so I'll remember something, and they'll say, "What?" And they'll mention something, and I'll say, "Really?" So it's all very selective, and I could only write about what I could remember. So there was, probably lots of stuff in there. I mean, there was debauched stuff, there was weird stuff, But I really wanted to write a book about music. You know, I didn't want to write the tell-all. You know, the kiss and tell. You know, which would have sold about 8 times the number of books. But I tried to be musically focused, and where I brought other people in, it was for musical reasons more than anything else. So if I name drop, it's because it's for a musical cause. Believe me.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
Your dad, does he like your music?
My dad, he had a hard time with my music. But my dad was a sort of an amateur guitar player. He loved Django Reinhardt. He loved Les Paul. He had guitar records, but he wasn't necessarily a good player. I mean, he never practiced for a start. So when I took up the guitar, he was thrilled, and he was really thrilled when I took classical lessons because he thought this was great, and you know. But when it got to rock and roll, I think it confused him, and he really didn't like it. And he'd still be saying to me, you know, when I was about 40, he'd be saying, you know, there's this great Fats Waller song you should be doing in your set, you know, a diner, you know, is there anyone finer? So to Carolina, and I thought, well, it's not really going to fit in what I do. Much as I love Fats Waller, you know, I really can't jam that in. So, so my parents really gave me a hard time actually at the beginning. That they really couldn't say that this was anything except you know, stupid, you know, teenage nonsense. And at some point, I settled down and get a real job, and they were even more confused when I didn't settle down and get a real job. But music turned out to be a better job than any real job I would have got. So it took them a long time to come to terms with that. You know, my father was very difficult in that way, and I never really came to terms with him, I suppose. Anyway, it's all in the book.
Yes. Yeah, I really enjoyed it, Richard. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you.
And thank you both. It was really wonderful to be on the back end listening. And thank you to everyone who joined us tonight. Any questions for us at Books and Books or at the Miami Book Fair, send us a line to purchase a book. I've dropped some links to further reading as well as to the book page on Books and Books. So thank you again, and I hope you all have a good evening. I'll be listening to your music for the rest of the night tonight, Mr. Thompson. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye.